guys, welcome to class. Today I'll be discussing different elements of narrative, specifically elements of story or plot. We'll be going through the plot diagram concerning the vocab. We won't necessarily draw the picture unless that would be a good visual to you. But we will go through the vocabulary necessary to dissect a plot, and then we will also discuss different types of characters within a narrative. And so the way we're going to do this is we're going to look at the story of Star Wars. Now, in front of you, you have two pieces of paper. One is a plot synopsis. One is the vocab sheet for this lesson. So the first thing I want you to do is go ahead and read the text, the plot synopsis of Star Wars, just to refresh yourself on the exact nature of that story. And so we'll give you a few minutes to do that. Once that's read, we'll move on and dissect that narrative for the plot elements we'll be examining today. So I'll give you probably about 2-3 minutes to go ahead and read that. If not, just signal me when you're done, and we'll move on from there.
Far off in a distant
Read it out loud.
far off in a distant galaxy, social future princess Lila, a young member confused. That's an I.
Is intercepted in the course of a secret mission by a massive Imperial Star Destroyer.
You're really good at reading the first 2 lines. That's 4
On the Death Star.
Meanwhile, Salkin has decided to break Prince Lula by selecting her home planet, Aaron with destruction.
Faced with this appalling dilemma, which is spelled wrong, Leia reveals the location of the hidden base, only to have Tarkin proceed with the attack on Alderaan, merely to demonstrate the power of the Death Star.
What's the millennial's fault then? And we have confidence.
Ladies, will you please take this class seriously?
Alright, we're done.
Ready to proceed?
We're done reading.
Wonderful. So the main elements of plot, as you see here, the exposition, the rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. I also included something called the inciting action, because I believe that's a very essential part of plot as we go through any narrative. Does anybody have any background in knowing these terms? Any idea of what some of them might mean?
It sounds like a fight's gonna start when you're inciting some action. Like, once someone took my sample.
And inciting some action?
Yep.
Yeah. How about you, Tim? Any background with these terms? Young man?
Not that I can say in class, sir.
All right. We will move on.
Little Tim fell down the well once.
Have you guys ever heard of the plot diagram before we move forward?
No, sir.
Do you think it would be helpful to see the visual, or do you just want me to go through the terms? I'm flexible on either one.
I like pictures.
Gonna go through the picture?
Yeah. Alright.
So, the first element of plot, as we see here, is what? Someone read it out.
Exposition.
Exposition. Exposition is simply the background information given to understand the story better. The characters introduced here and the setting is established. So an example from Star Wars is, well, first of all, as we see, the exposition comes immediately right at the beginning of any narrative, any story. The exposition in Star Wars, the best example to give of that, first of all, the setting generally is established immediately in films when long, long ago in a galaxy far, far away is flashed up on the screen. More specifically, the first planet we visit in Star Wars is named Tatooine. That's where Luke Skywalker, the main character, lives. So almost immediately we see that planet. We also see the inciting action pretty quickly in the film. But the pre-roll credits are also a form of exposition as it gives that background information needed to understand the coming story. All right, so the inciting action. Can anybody read the definition for me? Tim, will you please read the definition?
Inciting action. The event or decision that begins a story's problem. Everything up and until that moment is backstory. Everything after is the story.
Right. So where do you think on this diagram the inciting action would go? Would it go up here right at the top?
At the base of the incline.
Base of the incline, maybe right here at this corner?
Yes.
All right, so we're going to put the inciting action here. If you see traditional plot diagrams, they may not have the inciting action, but without the inciting action, it's very difficult to, again, kick off any narrative. So the inciting action, what do you think the inciting action would be from Star Wars? And the picture here is a hint. So if you've seen the film, or if you want to reference the text before you, what would you say the inciting action would be?
Pew pew, everyone's being died. People are getting choked with magic space powers.
Close enough. It is when Princess Leia is in possession of the stolen Death Star plans, and she's attacked by Darth Vader. It's one of the first scenes in the film. Pew pew, everybody dies, right? Alright, so the rising action, no surprise, is going to go here on the incline as it's rising, so that's the next step in the narrative. Rising action. Alright, Mr. Sandura, could you read that definition for me?
A series of relevant incidents that create suspense, interest and tension in a narrative, and the events leading up to the climax.
Alright, so the rising action, what do you think the example would be from the film or the text of Star Wars Episode 4's Rising Action? There's plenty of events here, we'll just name a few if we can. Going back to the text, let's go ahead.
Magical space shuttle. It was the bar in the fast food.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to think about.
Burrito.
You got it. So there's several examples of rising action within this narrative. The Sand People murder Luke's aunt and uncle. Ben Kenobi is met by Luke, and he begins to learn about his father and learn about the Force. And I guess the final end to the exposition here, and factoring into the rising action, would be the meeting of Han Solo, and then boarding the Death Star. The tractor beam scene is often referenced as kind of the end, or I guess one of the major elements of the rising action. And for those of you who have seen Episode 4, in the bar scene, Greedo did not shoot first. Han shot first. Climax is simply the most exciting part of the narrative, the turning point, in the story. So as we see in our diagram here, this part is the major turn in the diagram. It's also the peak of the excitement. So the climax is going to go right up here. And what do you believe the climax of the film to be?
When big spaceship Death Star goes boom.
You got it. I put this picture here because a lot of people believe that the climax of this film is the death of Ben Kenobi. I personally believe it's a little bit later, like you said, the assault on the Death Star. So as an example of the climax of the film, I have a clip here, which we will start in 2 minutes. So it's just about 2 minutes of content here to point towards the climax of the film. So everybody pay attention. This is a spoiler alert, but we've also seen the movie here.
What happens? Die.
It's still recording. Certainly that part of the film could be seen as the climax. Luke finally uses the Force, I think, for one of the first times, if not the first time, and is set on motion for a journey that will figure into the rest of the film itself, or the series, really. So anything between the climax, the resolution is the falling action, the main conflict is resolved. So you see right there in the climax, the conflict is resolved. But I wanted to add to this definition that parts of the story that are still relevant occur while they're tying up loose ends. So Han Solo's return, as you see there, I guess kind of signify the beginning of the falling action because they're still tying up aspects of their relationship with Han as the film comes to close. So, falling action. Resolution, obviously the end of the falling action, conclusion of the story, and there's a French word that goes with that, it's called denouement. Comes from the French word denouer, which means untie. So it is the unraveling or untying of the plot. So everything returns to peace. There's a lot less tension, no more tension. The diagram itself signifies that. And the example would be that Vader is seemingly defeated. And the heroes are rewarded for their work. Just see here, I'll just put a little bit. you see, order is restored, everyone seems at peace, they're being honored for their service. Luke finally joins the rebellion, which he talked about the entire film. So everything kind of has a return to normal, maybe even a new normal. So there you go. We'll move on to types of characters here in a second, but before we move on, I want to just quickly see if you guys are retaining bits of this lecture. So, I did not include the definitions here purposefully because you should have either been retaining the lecture itself or hopefully taking notes on these vocab terms. So we'll just alternate between Mr. Sandora and Mr. Miller here as far as definitions. They don't have to be exact, just to make sure you got the gist of each of these points. So Mr. Sandora, what would the exposition of the plot be?
That background stuff.
Background information. So what would be, who would be introduced? Characters, right? And once characters are introduced, there's one other thing that's established. There's general background information, characters introduced, there's one other thing. Think long ago in a galaxy far, far away. What is that together? Setting. You got it. Alright, so then the inciting action. Definition, Mr. Miller, please.
Of inciting?
Inciting action.
Are you saying exciting action?
Inciting action.
Boring action.
Exciting action is where the story takes a turn and starts building up tension.
So there's usually one trigger point, right? The turn that begins the whole plot. Okay?
Yes.
Alright. So rising action, Mr. Sandora, how would you define that?
When the action is now at a higher elevation, like up.
And they're building towards climax. Mr. Miller, would you define it, please? Simple terms.
Climax is the tipping point.
It's also the most what part of the story?
Interesting.
Interesting. Right. So falling action. Here, Mr. Sandora.
Like when you're falling off a cliff, when you're fighting.
Yes, but what did I say? I said parts of the story, some of the loose ends are still being tied up. So it's, the main part is over, but the events are still relevant, right?
Like getting the medals.
Getting the medals.
Unless you're chewing.
And resolution, Mr. Miller, fine. 2 words.
The solution.
The solution, the end. Alright, so then moving forward, we'll continue to use Star Wars as our example here. Types of characters. So protagonist and antagonist. Main character is the protagonist. Person who works against the antagonist. Those are simple. Only one of the following characters will fit into each of those categories. Main good guy, main bad guy. Main thing I want to focus on here is dynamic and static characters. So dynamic characters are characters that change throughout a story, and static characters are characters that do not change. So we're going to go through and just describe these characters. So first of all, Luke Skywalker. Is he the protagonist or antagonist?
Protagonist.
Protagonist. And would you say he's a dynamic or static character? Does he change throughout the story?
No,
He is not changed?
He doesn't change the most important way, and then he's still whining a little insufferable. But his view of
he changes at the very end. He changes,
Right.
but for the most part, he's kind of hateful towards a lot of things.
But this narrative has shaped him, right? In a way, that, and as you continue the trilogy, it becomes much deeper. So I would call him a dynamic character. What about stormtroopers? They're not protagonists, they're antagonists, because they're not the primary source of good or bad. Would you say they're dynamic or static? Static characters.
Humanity to parts of them.
Exactly. How about Chewbacca?
I thought he was a static.
Doesn't really change much. Vader?
I mean, apparently it changed on the suit.
That's a tough one because as the antagonist, he doesn't really change either. I guess at the end, it's not in this one. I don't know. He's static in this one.
Sure.
He doesn't have much of a presence.
I would accept either dynamic or static. Certainly know that he is the antagonist. Dynamic could be accepted because this narrative does kick off his obsession with Luke, but that's followed up in the next film. So if you don't see the next film, you might not understand how this narrative affected him yet. It's certainly in this particular narrative, static character. Leia, static or dynamic?
Let's say dynamic.
I would almost say static, except for that look she gives Han in that video.
She becomes more pleasant. She learns to trust the people.
She also loses her homeland, so I'd say probably dynamic. Although the way they form the character, she essentially is very static, despite all those things happening. Grand Moff Tarkin, are you familiar with this character?
I mean, Grim Reaper.
The general,
Static, certainly. So, you got it.
Dynamic.
You especially see that in the climax because he comes back as a change of heart most directly. I think probably the most dynamic character in the film because of that exact moment. And that's it. So I hope you guys learned